I welcome everybody at the 5th episode of Practical Experience of Implementing Distance Learning in Higher Education webinar series. We've been talking about the distance learning experiences of higher education institutions since the 27th of May. 18 higher education institutions have shared their difficulties, good practices, and innovative solutions so far. This time we're going to speak about how the Hungarian higher education connected national and umbrella organizations have experienced this extraordinary period. To support the goals of innovative and international higher education, we're holding today's event in English. On the one hand, we don't want to exclude foreign students studying in Hungary, as well as foreign lecturers, researchers, and professionals working here from the webinar discussion series. The webinar in English provides an opportunity for them to be part of our digital learning process. With the webinar held in English, we also want to open to the international higher education audience, which can help to promote Hungarian higher education, strengthen its network, and attract potential students and staff to Hungary. The first presentation will be about higher education research programs in Hungary. I would like to ask Dr. Sinóros-Szabó, Vice President of National Research, Development and Innovation Office, to talk about this very interesting topic.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank you for this opportunity to share a few thoughts how we, or the higher education institutions, managed to tackle this extraordinary situation we just experienced. I would like to highlight two of its main aspects, mainly the researchers' performance, how it was affected due to the COVID pandemic. Actually, for the higher education institutes to have their research activities actually working, mostly they need students to be present actually at the institutions, and this was not possible because of the well-known situation. Also, in case of research, it is a necessity to the researchers to be present at the location where he or she makes his research activities, because the necessary instruments are, of course, available only at the premises of the certain research institutes or at the higher education institutions. Now, with this in mind, we had to face the situation that the research projects will not go as smoothly as planned, and we had to make certain administrative changes so to make sure that the projects will be successful nevertheless. We have two major calls for the individual researchers. Both are involved in the higher education students, for the higher education students as well. One of them is the new National Excellence Program, and the other is the Hungarian Research Fund for Basic Research Projects, the so-called HÖOK projects. For the latter ones, we introduced quite a few changes in the procedure. Namely, we simplified the funding procedure because of the COVID situation, because we felt that this is necessary so that the research activities will be successful. We have made an announcement in April, actually, that the annual work phases of the basic research projects are financed upon the submission of the professional financial reports of the respective previous work phase. So basically this means that no further phase had to be implemented in this case. And till the end of September 2020, projects will not have to wait until the approval of their submitted reports. They should have waited otherwise. They are eligible for the next transfer of support on their reports are duly submitted. So basically this again means that they don't have to prove right now that research activities went in full order, because we all know that they were stopped in many cases. The researchers also do not need to send by post on paper their necessary administrative papers, but a scanned copy is applicable as well. And also the deadline for submission of professional and financial reports changed to 60 days after the end of state of danger. These measures, we believe, helped greatly the researchers to be safe and conscious that they can resume their research activities after the pandemic situation is over. Of course, certain research activities still could be carried out, for instance, data analysis and literature research and the like. But in most cases, when we are thinking on research activities, like in the case of life sciences, for instance, it's obviously a necessity to use the research infrastructures as mentioned. The other program, which is aimed directly to the higher education students, is as I already mentioned, the new national excellence program, where basically the higher education students from the very early stage of their career till the post-PhD period are financed for their research activities. In their case, they couldn't simply attend the higher education institutions. Therefore, we decided that their conferences, which should prove that actually the research activities were carried out and to show their research results, these could be carried out in digital way as well, so not only in person. It is also possible to have the Hungarian students conferences as well to have it in a digital way also, and it is very important also that the funds which are allocated for research development and innovation are at the very same level than previously, because we believe that the way out from this crisis actually is the raising of competitiveness both for the higher education institutions themselves and for the Hungarian SMEs as well. This means that we have to make sure that the sources for research development and innovation are there and available for usage, because this is basically the way out. And we've tried to make everything, and I hope that we were successful in it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, István. And you mentioned a lot of useful information about the programs. And we know that the office funds a lot of different target groups, students and companies and institutions and so on. So you talked a lot about the impact of the virus on the programs, but how did it affect the organization, the office itself?
Mm-hmm. Well, the office is
everyday operation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the office itself was, of course, affected. So we introduced home office quite early, actually. But luckily, our systems for grant applications are already, of course, online systems. And with the changes introduced, like I mentioned, that there is no need to handle on paper your requests for change in the projects, we could handle, I think, it quite nicely. So there was not really a problem, I think, in this case. And also, it might worth noting that our office had launched two types of projects in response of the COVID crisis. One of them was the so-called COVID-idea project, where individuals and organizations could share their ideas on how to tackle such situations in the future as well, not necessarily just for the COVID situation, but for any kind of pandemic situation, and very good ideas were raised among these. And also on institutional level, we finance quite a few projects which try to find solutions for the COVID issues in various aspects, like the diagnosis, the treatment, etc., of the COVID. Maybe one of the most well-known examples is that there was a very big project of making a statistically meaningful sample of Hungarian citizens to see the impact of COVID on society, and this was also financed by our office as well, because it's again a research activity.
Thank you very much, and you just answered my second question, because I wanted to ask you about the topics in the research, that whether the topics also were influenced by the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much, István. Thanks for the contribution. I wish you a nice day. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So the cornerstone of higher education training, that's quality assurance. That's without a question. The second presentation will be about the external quality assurance in the time of COVID-19. And I would like to ask Professor Valéria Csépe, President of Hungarian Accreditation Committee, to give an insight into this very important area.
So first of all, I would like to thank for the possibility to speak about our work at the Hungarian Accreditation Committee. And the first 3 slides are about our activities in a nutshell, because not many people know about what we are doing actually. So the Hungarian Accreditation Committee have a general evaluation task. It's not just QA, quality assurance in general, because there is a new approach in the European higher education area, and this is that the QA is the task of the higher education institutes. So we evaluate their work and foster high-level teaching and learning in the Hungarian higher education institutes. And what is the most important change in the last 5 years took place is a student-centered evaluation, especially the work, the institutional accreditation. So the prime stakeholders, students, play a particular role in the focus of our task and in our activity what concerns evaluation. So our task is to support the QA at each level and each participant of the higher education. That's our mission. And what you see on the next slide is about the organization, so how our Hungarian Accreditation Committee is structured. The highest level is the board. Board meets the final decisions. So we have standing committees, expert committees, special committees, advisory boards, and what is the most important, the foundation level is the secretariat. Different disciplines, so the committees are organized according to that. So the agriculture, arts, economics, engineering, humanities, etc., and especially the final part in the pedagogical training. So in this, we do our work, so evaluation, so the altogether in general, 350 people, 350 people are working regularly with our organization. And so that you can get further information, those who are interested what this work is about, the institutional work, the programs, etc. So you will see on our web page in English as well, on organization, procedures, internal quality assurance, publications, etc. So now about the topic for today, the COVID-19. So we have introduced a lot of changes early enough, and due to the development, infrastructural development organized in the last 2 years, we have quite a well-functioning system, but a lot had to be done. And here you see one page because the European Network of Quality Assurance Agencies, so the Hungarian Accreditation Committee is accredited by this European very important organization. So they collected the best practices during the COVID-19, how we got online for all of our external evaluation work. And Hungary is listed as the fourth and the fifth example. So the fifth example on this page of the NKFIH. What did we do and how we started with the immediate actions? We started very early, already on March the 2nd, because there were a lot of information on this, how a pandemic can take place. So there was first the denied presence at our office for all experts. prior to the meetings, and staff members traveled abroad in 2 weeks. And on the March 11th, I declared that, and so we announced on our homepage that the staff members are going to go in their home, so the home office. And we started on the 16th of March with the transitional work to online activities for all of our activities, including the evaluation of the university professors, applications, institutes, doctoral schools, program accreditations. So by the end of that month, so you can find in the statement on procedures carried out during the COVID-19 pandemic, so we switched to a total online work. The board, all the committees, and the secretariat as well. So what was done after that between April the 2nd and June the 22nd, so 2 days ago? So the organization of all online meetings in MS Teams, so it's one of the broadly used online platforms. All these, so we had this year 6 board meetings, 4 of them with full participation. So we never ever had something like this. So a lot of people like this type of work. We had to set up a secure access to our voting system in the Secretariat's information system. So it's a strictly IP-based permission. Is very important because we deal with a lot of sensitive data. This is very important. So we edited a full guideline for online meetings for all the boards, all the committees, and for the secretariat as well. So they how to invite, how to run the different meetings is very important. It doesn't belong to the digital skill for everyone. So, and guidelines for the online administration, and what we started in May, online site visits. So the online site visits for institutional accreditation. So we have already a site visit with all the reviews, 3 days reviews, and all the questionnaires for students. So one of the universities, 5,000 students we have already had this, and it's the same for the new type of accreditation of doctoral schools based on the European standards and guidelines. So the question is what we have learned. So we have learned a lot how to organize online all the activities, how we can be there all the time and serve further the Hungarian higher education toward to a higher level QA in everything. And what we've learned from this, that we have to change and reform or evaluation system, how we can take into account the digital activity of teachers and students, how the activity changed during this period can be kept further, so that how we can take into account the evaluation of teachers' performance, professors' performance, for example, the support for e-learning, new digital methods, online platforms, and all of this. And this is very important because we have to learn from the COVID-19 pandemic as well, how to keep further what we learned and how we can work very much effectively further in the future, so not to travel that much, even within the country, be there, be personalized, and digital. So I would like to thank that for your attention, and with a click, you will say how a diploma is going to change. So we are getting digital in this world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And first of all, congratulations for being mentioned as a best practice. So one of the most important findings of the higher education distance learning is that physical contact cannot be left out in trainings, in our everyday working conditions. What would you say, Professor Csépe, concerning your work, quality assurance, and your everyday procedures? Can you imagine to operate without physical contact in the future?
Yes, I can. So we will keep the online work for the remaining part of the year. So we set all the dates for the board meetings, and even we ask the committees whether they want to keep with this possibility, and 98% of the committee members voted for that we go with online practice further, and slowly switch to a little bit to a hybrid organization of the meetings, at least one personal meeting per semester. Is very important for networking, communication, etc. So what we learned, we want to keep and develop further.
Thank you. So the Hungarian Accreditation Committee is highly digital, and so you can go on. And as also in Hungarian higher education, a lot of institutions are thinking about hybrid semesters, starting the semester in a hybrid mode, and also the Hungarian Accreditation Committee is going to work like this. We mentioned several times that in the focus of this process, students have to be. They have to stand in the middle. So whenever we designed a new amendment in the law, whenever we wanted to create a program in this period, we always thought of the students first of all. I welcome you at this webinar episode, and I would like to ask László Murai, President of National Union of Students, to speak about the students' experience during the COVID-19.
Thank you for the opportunity. Welcome, everybody. Last period provided new challenges for higher education as well, and for students as well. My presentation title is "What are the factors that affect the replaceability of contact classes?" This is a very narrow topic, a narrow focus, and it may seem, my presentation may seem harsh at first. It has very bold statements, but I think if we examine the future of higher education and distance learning, we have to be very honest about our work, about our higher education system, and take the students' feedbacks very seriously. So in order to reflect on the situation, the National Union of Students in Hungary carried out an online survey between 27th of April and 8th of May 2020. And as a part of my presentation, I'm showing the results of this survey. During these 2 weeks, we received 12,000 valuable answers from 17,600 respondents that started filling our survey. So I suppose that this is a big number. And the answers arrived from respondents of 279 university-level programs of 22 universities. So this too is a big number as well. Although the research did not aim for representativeness, it is able to map the behavior patterns and opinions of students. The huge number of elements makes it possibly to see the frequency of such behavior patterns and opinions. On the third slide, I would like to examine the students' ambivalent attitude, that is, on the one hand, dissatisfied with the distance learning procedures introduced during the emergency, but on the other hand, considers a significant part of contact classes replaceable with online education even after the emergency period. So that's, I think, a very interesting part of our survey. One of our research questions asked the students about what percentage of contact classes could be replaced with online education. And according to the answers of the respondents, this percentage is about 42%, so that's a high number. Before I present the aspects affecting the replacement of contact classes, I'd like to state that in the research we consistently use the term distance learning, since it's spread in common speech during the emergency, in contrary to remote learning, távolléti oktatás, which is makes no sense right now in the terminology of distance learning. It's a different category, yes. Furthermore, while examining international practices where the concept of campus teaching, distance teaching, online teaching, and open education appear, it became clear that the concept of remote learning is difficult to define. On the fourth slide, I would like to declare that first of all, it can be seen that the university work schedule, level of training, and the available data traffic, the satisfaction with distance learning, and the employment are the factors that significantly influence the ratio of the replaceability of contact classes. Now I'd like to present these influencing factors on the fifth slide. While examining the level of training, the work schedule, and the replaceability, it can be stated that the demand for online education is decisive at each level of training and work schedule. There are no notable difference between the full-time, part-time, and evening training work schedules. While the students on the evening training would replace 55% of the contact classes, the full-time students would do the same with 41%, and those who receive part-time training would replace 50% of classes with online education. On the sixth slide, we can see that in this research, we observed the available data traffic as well for students, although 74% of the respondents have unlimited or more than 10 gigabytes of data. The available data traffic significantly determines the rate of online education, so that's an important factor. However, even those who have less than 1 gigabyte per month wish to replace 1/3 of the contact classes. On the seventh slide, we can see a dilemma that that was mentioned in the introduction. Even students that are not satisfied with distance learning at all would like to replace a huge amount of contact classes in the future as well. To draw an average, the results are represented in the followings. It can be stated that those who are not satisfied with distance learning at all would like to replace 1/4 of contact classes in the future. Based on the regression analysis that we did, this factor has the greater effect. Following the systematic improvement of distance learning, the rate may increase by 9% per degree of satisfaction. That's a huge number. And I would like to put an emphasis on this part because with the development of the distance learning, to substitutability may be as high as 75% among those who are now satisfied with the distance learning. On the ninth slide, we can see that regarding the employment, one forcible statement can be justified. For those who have jobs, the more set they are, the more helpful the partial introduction of online teaching methods would be, and it's almost by 50%. For the next slide, we will return the dilemma of the contact classes. We have already examined the basic problem previously on the emergency. Questions of the credit system, the contact classes, and the student employment were of high priority for us in our Future Prospects program called in Hungary Hungarian HÖOK program in 2017, and in our report on the credit system called Credit Jelentés. made by the end of 2019. In our campaign, communication campaign, Your Credit Worth More, Better Accredited, we collected the feedback of nearly 8,000 students about the national implementation of ECTS. So even the strategic document of 2014 named Gear Shifts in Higher Education, fokozatváltás felsőoktatásban, stated the following. One of the quality limiting features of the methodological practices of Hungarian higher education, not ubiquitous but very strongly represented, is the focus of contact classes, the higher number of teachers' working hours, and the low percentage of students' independent work. This aspect encourages both the teachers and the students to restrain their performance. So that's a very bold statement from this document, and I would like to point it out. As an answer to the previous aim of the document stated that the field of the higher education innovation, the methodology has to change, the one that focuses on practice and independent work of students. The 2016 action plan of the strategic document also drew attention to the fact that the current practice is also damaging, since it does not motivate individual student work, and because of that, it does not promote the full acquisition of profession. The solutions to the problem may be the consolidation of the credit system, which could promote the introduction of such international practices in online education like MOOCC, a massive open online courses structure, started from MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and led by Robert Brown in 2012. Web-based open forms of education that address great number of students living in different countries may point to such teaching methodologies that are built on open technologies and high-quality open educational resources in order to create a collaborative and flexible type of learning. The background of this approach is open course web, free open access platform made by MIT. The focus of the MOOC type education form is the sharing of knowledge in a democratic way, the support of student activity and lifelong learning. Its tools are structured processing of the curriculum divided to each university program, as well as sharing of the necessity of materials, digital books, videos, and provision of forums discuss the elements of the acquired knowledge. And in our last slide, summary will be the following. First point is even the students that are dissatisfied with distance learning would replace a quarter of contact classes with online education in the future. Second part, with the improvement of distance learning, this demand is expected to grow. Third, we will examine the reason of the dissatisfaction with distance learning in the second part of our research, in order to get a full picture on this topic. Fourth, according to our hypothesis, however, the fundamental reasons is the great number of contact classes that can be rectified with the consolidation of credits. The fifth point is, and final point, this might point to the introduction of new solutions and methods in distance learning as well. And thank you for your attention. And I hope this presentation in the future will be useful for us.
Thank you very much. And this survey is very, very interesting indeed. Is it publicly available?
Not yet, but it will be in the summer on narrow focus topics we will publish to the public. I stated that Hungarian students are not liking the online education at this time, but you know it's a perspective statement, because the approval of online distance learning among students is 40%. So we consider if there was such a short period of time to make a switch in higher education, we consider that not all the universities, not all in the universities, not all, it was not widespread to be able to switch from analog to digital in a second. I think 40% approval rate is not a bad number at all. But in this prospect of time, in the future, we have to raise this number by a significant amount.
Yeah, you're doing a great job. Thanks for you've done a lot during this crisis situation.
Try to, at least.
To be honest, nobody liked the situation. This wasn't like a situation that we wanted to be part of this experience.
That's true.
We had to. But now, right now, we're talking about how to make it good quality. And at the end of this webinar, I'm going to ask Professor Csépe about this topic. And it's also good that you mentioned the strategic dimension of your experience as well. We've got another very important student organization in Hungary, and that's the Association of Hungarian PhD and DLA candidates. And I'd like to ask Viktória Lilla Pató, Vice President for Foreign Affairs, to speak about doctoral training during a special legal order.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. It's an honor to be here. I think we are very honored that for you it's also important to show what was the challenges and what we faced as young researchers or PhD candidates during this special legal order caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. In the first part of my presentation, I'm going to speak about the challenges we face on an individual and as an organization as well. And after, we are going to talk about the collaboration, what we had, because we think that this is a key element of combating such a pandemic, to collaborate with authorities and other organizations. And in the last slide, I'm going to present the lessons, what we learned, and how we are going to continue our work together, and also how we would like to develop our system according to the lessons what we learned from this special legal order. As an individual, we face a lot of challenges in terms that there are very, very big differences between the institutions, the universities. They have their particularities, and this connects to their own authority. And of course, we are not going to harmonize it on a national level, but we try to gather information from all the universities, from all the doctorate councils of the universities, to have more insight what they face with, and how can we help as a doctoral candidate representation organization. We also faced with the differences between the scientific disciplines. I'm talking about the differences between social and natural sciences. This is a very big issue here, because during the pandemic, some scientists could not do the research properly because, for instance, laboratories or research institutions had to be closed, and that's why they had some problems in doing the research. In the meantime, it's slightly more for social scientists. They had more time to work on their dissertation on their research at home, because the online databases were available, which was a very huge development, I think, in universities and also in Hungary. The biggest problem as individuals, we thought that this is for the international fellows. And this is a very huge issue here, because mainly for Stipendium Hungaricum students, the contract what they had was not really flexible in solving this situation. And for a couple of weeks they faced a big uncertainty of their scholarship, or they stay in Hungary. And we also created a tool where international fellows who are studying in Hungary in a PhD program could write us directly what is their challenge. And I saw that the biggest problem was the uncertainty what they had, and also that someone wanted to go home, and it happened in some cases that they stuck in a third country, for instance, not having a home in Hungary and not going home to their country of origin. And it was a problem for them because in this term they did not really know what's going to happen with them and when this whole situation comes to an end. Of course, nobody knew, but it was a big challenge for them in this semester. We also faced with the legal interpretation of scholarship disbursement, but it had been solved by the ministry. So I would like to thank the ministry in this presentation as well, that they were with us and all these problems have been solved for now. We, as an individual, the postponed conferences made some problems in gaining the scientific credits in applications as well, and also in the semester of a PhD student. So universities, of course, tried and now still trying to eliminate this problem and postponed, for instance, the semester with a couple of months, or they gave something to eliminate this problem, but at the beginning of the pandemic, we were afraid that how we're going to fulfill this semester and complete it. We had some uncertainty as well with the complex exam and the PhD degree process. It is very also on an institutional level, so we could not say that every university has to make complex exam or start a PhD degree process and make the committees online. We couldn't do this, and nobody can, but because it's the authority of the university. But the National Doctoral Council also gave some statement how they promote to do the complex exam and the other processes in gaining the PhD degree. And how we can see right now, all the universities started to work online in this term as well. And also we have to mention those who are just wanted to enter to the doctoral training, to the education. So the doctoral admission was also a challenge, but we saw that it had been transferred online. So all the applications and all the process worked very well. As an organization, we faced also with the same problem that all the events what we had as the scientific departments of DOSZ, and as an organization like the biggest national conference, the Spring Wind Conference, which had to be held in May, it had to be postponed, and we are going to put it into the digital sphere as well in October. So it was a challenge for us. It was very challenging to build a community without meeting personally, but of course we try to connect online with all the representatives. We had an increased number of advocacy cases, mainly from the challenges what the individual faced with, as I mentioned previously. And also we had to combat the disinformation, which was also a crucial part here, because we had to inform the people promptly, and we had to wait for the better authorization of an information what we can share. But I think it's very important to share information only if it's approved in the special legal order. So how I already mentioned, the collaboration and the cooperation with authorities, it's a key element for us in combating or eliminating the negative impacts of the pandemic. And I would like to distinguish the internal collaboration and the external collaboration. About the internal collaboration, I would say the organizational level. So we were closely cooperating with the doctorate councils of the universities, which present the interest and represent the interest of the university's doctorate students. And also we had a strong connection and cooperation with our scientific departments. On the external collaboration, I have to mention the national level, which was very promising, I can say. So we can cooperate with the ministries, with the Hungarian Doctoral Council. Hungarian Accreditation Committee was very well organized, we think, this time, because we are experts in the expert committees in the accreditation committee, and it was very fascinating that they put their expert group meetings online, and everything worked very well. So it was a great development from their side, we think. And also we will work together with Tempus, asking for some information about international fellows. How can we treat their situation? And as a non-authority, we are connected with the Hungarian Rectors Conference. We also had some digital meetings there, and the Hungarian doctoral student organizations in the Carpathian Basin, which we have 4, and we are strongly connected with them. So we kept in touch during the pandemic as well. How can they treat it not in the confines of Hungary? And also we are connecting the youth advocacy organizations. And on the European level, I mentioned here the European Commission because we were promoters, and also we took part in the COVID-19 EU versus virus hackathon, which was, I think, very important. And as an organization, we registered as a promoter to this hackathon, and I personally took part in that, so it was very exciting. And also we are connected with the European Council of Doctorate Candidates Engineer Researchers, the so-called Eurodoc, and the online meetings cases, it was just so many during the pandemic than I've ever seen it before. So we try to track the situation in other European countries as well. Draw a lesson. The lesson we have learned, the future objectives, that the digital transformation, it worked well, how we can see. Of course, the first couple of weeks were a bit not so encouraged from this way, but after we saw that the databases were accessible and available for everyone in the universities and also in research institutions. The online supervision and courses for PhD candidates were well. We also have some feedbacks when PhD candidates kept lessons for graduate students. It worked also well, so they did not have any problem with that. And and also lessons that we try to digitalize some of our scientific events, and that's a point where I have to refer to my previous statement that we had to postpone the Spring Wind Conference, and now I have the honor to announce that we are going to organize it in October, 16th of October, and it's going to be, okay, we have a plenary session, but everything is going to be virtual, and we are going to have 30 virtual classrooms, let's say, where the presenters can present their current researches. And this digital conference is going to involve 700 presenters. So it's going to be a big deal, and we are looking forward to organize it. And also we keep on tracking institutional interferences. And a brand new thing, which we already have the applicants, now just we have to select them. This is the DOSZ ambassador system, because this year was also approved that we have to involve much more international candidates, doctoral candidates to our processes and keep in touch with them. So that's why we are going to nominate one person from each country from where we have PhD candidate in Hungary and who they apply. And this is going to be a brand new ambassador system. They are going to be the link between the scientific community of their country of origin and between Hungary. And also another important thing, and this is my last sentence, I promise, from this year, that this year was not only important for us because of the pandemic, but because this is the first year when the new systems PhD students are going to graduate. And that's why we're going to create a postdoc survey. How could they face with the challenges of this 2+2 years PhD program? We have the freshman survey in every year. We do it with the new ones who are just entering into the PhD education. But now we're going to do the postdoc survey as well, and we hope that we have some lessons after all. Thank you for your kind attention. Of course, if you have any question, just feel free to ask.
Thank you very much, Victoria. And you just mentioned 3 keywords of this period. That's flexibility, cooperation, and empathy. I can't wait to hear more about this ambassador system you introducing just now. I would like to ask you, how do you visualize the next semester for PhD and DLA students? Online, hybrid, or physical?
You mean as an education or conferences?
Yes, in which format do you see to start the next semester for PhD students?
Thank you for the question. I think it's going to be a hybrid one. And I think that for have a better or more conscious financial thoughts, we should continue with the hybrid methods, because in some cases we found that some research could be effective even if we do not travel in a foreign country, for instance. Of course, I like to travel, and I'm saying that traveling is important, how also the President, Valéria Csépe, mentioned that it's very important to meet in person and build relations between people. But maybe we can have another set of mind. How can we organize something on the digital sphere as well, because it's working?
Thank you so much. A lot of backup service in this period came from the educational authority. And I know that the authority, you've been very busy and you've done a lot for all of us, for Hungarian higher education. I would like to ask Dr. Renata Vanó, Vice President for Higher Education from Educational Authority, to speak about your experiences. What were the difficulties? How could you solve these problems? What are the lessons learned?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Let me first of all shortly introduce the field of higher education in the Educational Authority and our scope of duties. The higher education field of Educational Authority consists of different departments, and we first of all conduct public administrative procedures and collect data and making analysis. Our departments are the Department of Higher Education Registration, the Department of Admission Procedure, Department of Hungarian State Scholarship, and the Department of Higher Educational Analysis. As I mentioned, first of all, we conduct public administrative procedures. We are licensing educational activities, operating official registers, collect data, and we analyze this data and give to the public and also to the ministry. We run the graduate tracking system, carrying out different supervisions. And during COVID-19, there are questions occurred in relating students' data. What kind of questions occur? And for these questions, we try to give answers, analysis, researches. What changes are taking place in active and passive status among students? Will be there increasing or decreasing the number of the students in different study fields, in different programs? What will be the patterns in cancellation of studies or in postponements? Will students change from full-time to part-time? What will be the number of international students? How will it differ in the next coming future? How all these problems affect the enrollment? What will be the percentage of future students to come to the higher education, and if they enroll, what will be the percentage that not enroll to the higher education? We will see, we collect data and we analyze it. We collect the data constantly, but obviously for the analysis we need a certain time. We will see at autumn time how the numbers occurred at springtime and what will be the next semester. I collected the questions we would like to give answers for our graduate tracking system. Because we assume that there will be certain changes in career paths, and it will be very interesting to see how the career paths will differ. How will differ the unemployment rate among graduates and among non-graduates? We will see. We are very curious about this. What kind of graduate skills will be sought by employers? Very important question. And higher education has to have answers for these questions. Work and studies. How can it go parallelly? How will affect the COVID, the student regarding work and study together or parallelly? And last but not least, how we can help pupils and students in career guidance. We would like to give answers to these questions as well. We have data available in the higher education information system, at the educational register, at the admission system, the state scholarship system, and of course in the graduate tracking system, and our future perspectives, challenges to check these data, to collect data furthermore, and analyze nationwide the data and give results back as well to the ministry, as well to the higher education institutions, as well to the students. And of course, our goal is to examine and check international trends as well.
Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation, and thank you for the support you provided during this very, very difficult period. Data has become ever important, and the questions you just mentioned are questions that we're asking from ourselves every day. What will happen to our trainings? How the graduate tracking will be affected by the new skills and the new requirements from the labor market. So we are looking forward to the analysis in autumn. The other field that was affected by the virus very much, that was internationalization and mobility. I welcome Judith Hermándi Berenc, Deputy Director General from Campus Public Foundation, who is going to speak about the impact of COVID-19 on the internationalization of Hungarian education, higher education in Hungary.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much for inviting our organization to this excellent webinar. Just to make everything clear, I would like to introduce our organization, who we are, what we are doing. We are a non-profit organization established back in 1996 by the Hungarian government with the task of managing international cooperation programs and projects in the field of education, training, and youth. As regards higher education, we are promoting mobility programs both for outgoing and incoming students and also staff members, with an approximate number of 20,000 persons per academic year. So there I would like to switch back that it was a big effect on mobility because it affected a lot of persons, both outgoing and incoming students and staff. We are also managing transnational cooperation programs, and we are also aiming at contributing to the development of the quality of Hungarian higher education through promoting different internationalization activities. Today, I'm going to talk to you briefly about the effect of the pandemic situation on internationalization, but mainly from the point of view of mobility. As regards outgoing mobility, we can say that there is an approximate 10,000 persons taking part in different mobility schemes per academic year, such as the Erasmus Plus program, the Campus Mundi, different bilateral programs, or the CEPUS program. And during the spring semester of 2020, approximately 2,600 grant holders were affected. So that many persons had to cut off their mobility activities and either return home or continuing their studies online in the host countries. So when the Hungarian government declared a state of emergency, the Tempus Public Foundation introduced some measures in order to help students and staff members. We recommended all students to continue their studies online, either after returning home or either in the host country if they could solve staying there. And then we set up a new website for publishing up-to-date information on the pandemic situation. We also made a very user-friendly, very well-readable, very easily readable guide for mobility participants, because we think that in this situation, everybody needs very clear guidance on how to go on with the mobility activities. We also operate an online service for actual individual questions related to the COVID-19 situation. And after consultations with all the stakeholders, like the DG Education and Culture and the Commission, the ministries, higher education institutions, or the Central CEPUS office, we declared the situation as force majeure, and we started working on setting up clear procedure on how to handle force majeure cases. So we set up a force majeure team within the campus, and we formed the procedure, and we also set up a new online system for receiving applications regarding force majeure. I would like to talk a bit about the aspects of evaluation of the force majeure cases. Since these cases are all individual, we are aiming at providing a very flexible approach when handling these requests. As a basic rule, we can say that the force majeure application can only be submitted by students and staff who are granted by any other mobility schemes. The grants are only available for on-campus period. So for virtual mobility, like online classes taken from home, this period is not available, not eligible as a force majeure. But if students continue their online classes in the host country, obviously the force majeure costs are refundable. It is very important that both the already paid costs and the non-refundable force majeure costs, the extra costs, can be covered. So in this way, it can happen that the grant plus the extra costs can exceed the originally awarded costs. So I think this is very important. And obviously, there is always the possibility to postpone mobility or later continue it if the host institution is also open for this method. But as life goes on, we are preparing the next academic year. The applications are already open. We receive applications, we evaluate applications continuously, and the decision-making by our Board of Trustees is also continuous. But it is very important that results of the applications are conditional, because these mainly depends on the actual restrictions, the situations in the host countries. It is also very important that basically the grant is only available for the on-site activities, so not for virtual mobility, but as a recent decision made by the European Commission, it is also possible to start the mobility period with an online, with a virtual period, and later it can be switched on to actual physical mobility. And the grant is available for the physical mobility. But, I have made many buts in this situation, but for higher education institutions, the organizational costs are also available for organizing the virtual part of the students' mobility. So there I have to make a distinction between the eligibility of costs for persons, for students, and for higher education institutions. Okay, what is also very important is to emphasize that before starting an actual physical mobility, it is absolutely essential to collect information on the host country from higher education institutions and partner institutions. So it is very important that in this situation, everybody has a personal responsibility to look after information, up-to-date information. Okay, if we look at on the other side, on the incoming mobility side, we can state that the pandemic affected the most the Stipendium Hungarican program from our portfolio, because for the 2019-2020 academic year, more than 9,000 foreign students enrolled in Hungarian higher education institutions in the frame of this program. Just to tell you very briefly about this program, it promotes or it provides Hungarian state scholarship for foreign students to attract them to study in Hungarian higher education institutions. In this program, we are working together with almost 70 partner relations worldwide. So that explains why the pandemic situation affected this program very seriously. And after the state of emergency was declared by the Hungarian government and the higher education institutions switched to online classes, we introduced some certain measures. Basically, just very similarly to the outgoing mobility slide, basically we recommended foreign students to stay in Hungary, to remain where their residence is, and continue studies online. And in this way, they could keep their stipend, they could keep their allowances, since they were living in Hungary. So they had costs where we had to contribute. Students who chose returning home and not, they were actually risking being unable to come back. Yeah. But if they do so and they stay away from Hungary for 30 days, then they will have no right to get their stipend until they return. Yeah. But at least they didn't lost their scholarship status, so they could carry on online classes from their home countries later on. And on the next slide, there is another option. It is not a real option, it is a case, and we have already heard about it, when students stuck in third countries in a way of going home. And for these students, if they continue their studies, they are also entitled for getting their stipend, since they have living expenses in the third countries as well. Okay, some other temporary provisions were also introduced. One of them is in connection with the credit requirements. It means that fulfilling the minimum credit requirement, which is actually 36 credits per academic year, is not examined at the end of the academic year. And the other one is that basically for BA and MA students, it is a possibility to postpone or to extend their studies with 2 semesters. But in this situation, in the situation of emergency, those students who have already exhausted this option, this extension option, they could apply for a 3rd semester. So it is a bit evening their stay, and we try to help them with this opportunity to finalize their studies in Hungary. Okay, and I would like to tell you a few words about the next application period, which is actually up and running. The entrance exams electronically online have been conducted with a disruption, so it went really well, so well that actually the decision on the awarding of scholarships is expected to be made in accordance with the original timeline, which is a very, very big thing, I guess. And the preparation of the new academic year is also underway. We are in continuous communication with all the stakeholders, with the funding partners, with the ministries, with the actual students, with the partners, with the Hungarian higher education institutions. So in spite of the current situation, I think the state of application is very stable. Okay, and just one last thought about this current situation I would like to share with you is that it is absolutely clear that this situation has an effect both on individual mobility and on internationalization of higher education as a whole, globally, worldwide. But to looking into the details, to analyze these effects, the long-term effects, we still need time. Mm-hmm. So I think we have to work on it. We have to looking into the details. We have to see what happens, because it's really important to form the future of these programs. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And I can say that Campus Public Foundation has managed this challenging time extremely well. You've been very flexible and professional at the same time. But our cooperation hasn't ended, because we have to prepare for the incoming students in September. So we still have a lot to do, but I'm sure that we will find solutions together.
I'm sure too. Thank you.
This webinar episode was about the quality and how to develop, how to ensure that distance education is not a must, but it's intentionally provided good quality training program. I would like to ask Professor Csépe, what do you think? What makes distance education good quality? What criteria could be set up for quality distance education?
Thank you very much for this very nice and challenging question. So how to be successful? It has a lot of prerequisites. And first of all, I would like to start with the very basic. That's the ABC of online education. And we heard from the other presentation as well. Access, broadband, and content. So the A, B, E, and C of good online education. And the criteria of successful online learning and teaching, so the online education, relies first on the structure. So whether we do have a high quality, user-friendly administration and information platform served by the higher education institution on everything, and especially for students, including class and course organization, these study plans, how they are going to organize teaching and learning, basically learning and instruction, for class, for groups, for pairs, for individuals. So how they rely on peer learning. So no one mentioned it. It's very, very important. So how student focused in the administration and information, providing higher education and institution than the content and methods. So what is the core and what is additional? So actually what we did mention today several times, and I gave the name to it, this is the new normal. And we have to define what is the new normal for online lectures, webinars. So they're highly important. What part of the personal presence contributes to teaching, whether we do have real ebooks or just digital something in general in form of a PDF. It doesn't have to do too much with digital. Whether we have interactive programs, whether we use even in higher education, gamified teaching materials, what contributes to the engagement of the student relies on a very basic principle of knowledge construction. Instead of passive listening, for example, sitting in a classroom, especially in a huge lecture room, and this changes the motivation on both sides, on the side of the professor and on the side of the student as well. Whether we do have better control possibilities, and that contributes to the content, how do we get access to, and whether we have a possibility, I mean students, during learning for a self-assessment and to have a feedback. So we have to change our mode of learning on the student side and the mode of instruction and teaching on the professor side. This is very important, and it's highly related to the digital competence. But digital competence is not everything. Something what is very often sad that there are digital natives. Come on, there are no digital natives. Just having the skills to use a computer or use a smartphone, it's not being native yet. What do you use it for? So structured content. And there is the general approach. How personalized our teaching programs are. Personalized and digital together, that makes the success of the online education. And online presence can be rethought and set our mind according to that being here, for example, in a webinar together, personal, not that much as sitting together, but close to, and we can introduce this on the national and international level, and in our higher education institutes go toward blended learning. And blended learning is very important. And the last one is communication. Communication, to have communication clear, simple, and reliable. That's the secret of successful systems and changes. For example, so the many broadly used online platforms were introduced. But it doesn't work very well if one particular institution and classes use several different platforms. I don't want to list how many I do use per day, the broadly used platforms on the governmental level, on institutional level, or private level, from Mr. Rami, I mentioned Skype, Zoom, WebEx, Teams, and this system, and many others. Basically, they are the same, but we do feel that we are not skilled enough. And the less experience the student, and this is especially valid for public education. So knowledge construction is very important, so we have to rethink what is the new normal. So we can better control our life and to have a better work-life balance. In this transitional time, we have worked more than ever, but this shouldn't be the normal. So that's why it's very important, and I'm always very happy, and I mention always how happy I do feel myself as chairing the HACS board to have the student involvement and contribution is very important, and there is a particular rise of collaborative platforms. I'm a researcher and a core member of one doctoral school. It was a very difficult time for all of us to have all the time online presence with my students, and even on the international level, although our early stage researchers, and that's what is used for early career researchers, in the Marie Curie European Training Network program. They are with us, they stuck in Hungary. So they had to work and how to motivate. And some mentioned by the DOSZ, empathy is very important so that you can continue the ABC. I started with device. You choose according to the content and compatibility of your studies. You can continue with E as education, the level of education, and the schedule of education, and even empathy with the emotional part, and go toward flexibility. And finally, I mentioned something we have to rethink in these times. If we want to have real blended learning, if we want to have hybrid methods, to change the tyranny of credit. Because in credit, there is the activity of the student as well, working at home, doing this and that. So the credit is not, I don't say anything new with this, credit is not just based on the contact classroom settings. For practicals, it's very important, but there are a lot of new skills we have to develop, especially the soft skills. And soft skills are very important because employers value these soft skills very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very comprehensive answer, and your thoughts will be well utilized in the process of new norms creation. My special guest today is Professor Paul Coyle, co-founder and director of the Entrepreneur Mindset Network, but besides he's had a very successful academic career as well. And you've been to Hungary, Budapest, so you've got a picture of the Hungarian higher education. I'd like to ask you, Paul, that if you can speak about how entrepreneurial mindset can help in a crisis situation, such as COVID-19, and some words on how you perceive distance education.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share some thoughts on all the things that we've all been talking about this morning. And I'd like to thank the speakers for some really insightful reflections on everything that's been happening. I'm going to try and draw out 4 main themes and share a list of questions and challenges for the future, which I hope we can follow up after today's webinar. For the majority of people, everything began as a real challenge. Things were very difficult, but surprisingly, academics and students adapted very quickly. And people have been saying to me, they adapted quickly because they had to. And it was important to have the right mindset. You needed to say to yourself, this has to happen. How do I make this happen? I've no other choice. And what's interesting about that is that people then quickly adapted to see opportunities in what was happening. And they talked about, we've heard this phrase this morning, resetting to a new normal. So some people, I'm thinking particularly somebody I spoke to in Finland, it's been a huge opportunity. They've done a lot more research. There's been more collaboration. They've written more research papers. So they've been very productive. What seemed to work overall was when people felt more comfortable with change and some degree of uncertainty. And I think this raises a question for the future about how can we prepare students for complexity and ambiguity so that they are able to embrace these types of situations. And an interesting question is, why did it take a crisis for universities to embrace this digital transformation? Why was it not something that we were already working on? So I think let's think about space as one of the themes, because the first thing to happen, obviously, and you've spoken about this, was that universities closed, organizations closed, buildings closed. It wasn't possible to go to work. And many people experienced remote working and online learning for the first time. People have told me that it was really good not to have to travel for 2 hours to go to work. They liked that. But what was a real difficulty, I think, for professional people and also for students was finding a suitable space at home where you could study, because there was the mixture of sharing accommodation with family and friends and very trivial things like people feeling uncomfortable about how they looked online, what the background was behind them, how they were lit, all of these sorts of things. But very interestingly and very quickly, many conferences that were meant to be physical and many meetings that were meant to be physical, they quickly moved online. And I'm sure that you're noting that there are far more webinars available at the moment, and there seems to be much more international collaboration. And I think that these are really good things. I think it's very important that I address my comments to the quality of learning, because this seems to be the central idea that we're trying to talk about. I think the speed of change meant that at first there was a very simplistic use of digital tools. Zoom, for example, allowed academics to broadcast a lecture. But there are problems with that. And I think we quickly discovered that watching somebody on a screen talking for a long time, it's hard for them to hold your attention. What seemed to work was shorter presentations with very clear aims and outcomes. Students have been reporting that they don't like recorded classes. They want to watch something that is live. And in particular, they missed the contact with academics and the social opportunities with other students. So I think the lesson we can take away, which is absolutely necessary, is that we need to use the technology, the digital tools, to provide as many opportunities as possible for people to interact. It seems to me that's the purpose of the technology, and we need to work hard at doing that. One-to-one interaction in this technology seems to work quite well. Group interaction is much more difficult, I think, and we need to learn more about that. For example, we need to, I don't know so much about this, but I've had a little bit of experience, digital breakout rooms where larger groups can get together in for smaller conversations. I think above all, we need to work hard to make sure that learning is active and that it's not passive. And I think this is a really interesting question, because this type of education is placing much more responsibility on students to manage their own learning, and not all students are comfortable with that. They prefer to be in a more passive role, interacting with the universities. So I've only got a couple of moments to speak, so I'll just finish up with some of the challenges as I see them. I think the question is, how should we deal with the variable level of experience amongst academics? Because some academics have zero experience of using this type of technology. We have to face up to the fact that not all physical learning can be replicated. And we heard examples today about people needing access to specialist facilities like laboratories. That's a problem. I think the big problem that's come back talking to people all over the world is that assessment and examinations are difficult to conduct online. People are really struggling with that. And I think that there's a need for some help. Digital tools, I share the frustration with, there are so many digital tools, but some people were reporting that their choice was actually restricted by their university, by their IT services, and that was causing problems as well, because some of the tools didn't work, or they didn't have access to the tools that people invited them to use. I have had some experience of this, particularly in working with people in some of the countries in the Far East, but internet connections can be very unstable. And also, for some people, they're expensive. And I think that raises the question of, can we be sure that all our students have equal opportunity, equal access to the digital learning opportunities? I think that we're all learning about how working remotely is blurring the lines between home and life. And I heard somebody mention, I think this was a good point, we need to be on top of having a good work-life balance, and to make sure that working remotely doesn't mean we're working all the time, because I think that is one of the dangers. There are other things. Have we understood all the implications of data protection and privacy? I think that's another big issue. And then looking to the future, are we going to return to predominantly using physical spaces, or will we have this blend of physical and digital? And how will universities manage the costs of physical spaces and online spaces? And we might want to look outside higher education for some of our answers. There are already big messages coming out of the corporate world that they're going to want to use less space, and they're going to want to have a workforce that is not just working in the physical corporate spaces, but is also working at home as well. How can we manage the expectations of students? I'm not still sure in my own mind whether students equate quality with contact, and that they think of online as being of less quality than the physical interaction. And I think that's something we need to understand about the expectations of students. One of the fascinating things is, how can we provide high quality education that prepares students for the real world? And how can we do that if academics have very low level ability or interest in digital skills? I think this is quite a dilemma. What will continue to drive the change in the future? If the pandemic hopefully fades away and this is no longer the driver, will these issues remain high on the agenda, and what will drive them forward? And I think the interesting question for me is both at the level of an institution and at the level of a country of thinking about the higher education sector. How do we have a joined up approach to these problems? It's hard enough to obtain that joined up approach within a single institution, but trying to achieve it across a country with its variety of different institutions, I think, is another level of gap. So what I would say is that my experience is that the questions we've talked about today, the excellent comments that people have made, the very real issues that they've raised, these are the same issues that people all over the world are trying to make sense of. And in that sense, I think there's a real opportunity for us to collaborate internationally and share ideas and share our experiences. And if we are able to find some solutions, that we're sharing that in an international conversation.
Thank you very much, Professor Cole, for your very interesting ideas, and that you brought new perspectives into the dialogue. The webinar series has come to an end, but the digital transformation of higher education in Hungary has not. The next step will be that Hungary has won expert support within the framework of Structural Reform Support Program to facilitate the digital transformation of Hungarian higher education. The project will be implemented in close cooperation with the European Commission, OECD, and the Hungarian policy field. We will be provided with strategic digital interventions for our new action plan of the higher education strategy and a set of indicators assessing the digital readiness of higher education institutions. So this will be a very important work, and I really count on all the speakers' cooperation and collaboration. And as you mentioned, Paul, global crisis has turned into a global human experience where we found similar solutions. And this way we are very much able to cooperate and collaborate. Thank you very much.